Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Live Chat with James, coming to you from the studios in Vancouver, British Columbia for ProPix TV. Once again, of course, you are invited to share your comments in the comment section. If you have a topic that you would like to discuss, by all means, put it up in the comments and we'll talk about it. Other than that, welcome aboard. Welcome Oren Vincent joining the chat here. And again, we are talking about all different topics. We can start with the Sinaloa Cartel. Again, they have links to Surrey, British Columbia, the city in which I reside in here in British Columbia, Canada. Now, not to isolate them, they are reaching out to different communities across the country here in Canada and around the globe. And that is never a good thing when we see expansion by the different cartels or the different international crime organizations. Now, recently, hello Rana, thanks for joining. Recently here in Surrey, British Columbia, of course, they have arrested several people in links to certain drug labs and drug distribution networks. And some of those are tied directly to supplies coming in from Mexico. The cartels are making a bigger presence here in Canada, but a lot of work is being done by the Surrey Police Service, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as well as our international neighbors working together to try to curb the not only the importation of cocaine and other illicit drugs, but also the synthetics such as the fentanyl that's coming in from overseas as well. One of the markets that we see increasing again is, of course, out of India. And there are laboratories there that are set up as, excuse me, sorry about that. There are laboratories set up in India that are being run and they're distributing fentanyl and other precursors for fentanyl and other drugs to the international markets. And some of those are making their way down into Mexico, where they will convert them into or manufacture illicit drugs that can then be distributed into the US and into Canada. Now, even more so, they are bringing in the precursors and setting up labs here in Canada and throughout the US. That is nothing new, but the number of large-scale lab busts that have happened in British Columbia and Western Canada over the last several months is alarming to one regard, but at the same time, it's also comforting to know that the RCMP and other law enforcement agencies are cracking down and catching them. Welcome Kizzy, welcome Terry Sullivan, Betty Whitnick, Russell Johnson, welcome everybody. Don't forget that you're more than welcome to throw topics up on the screen in the comment section that you'd like to discuss. We are live, so that's the benefit of it. But again, the Sinaloa Cartel, with their involvement in the illicit drug activity in Canada, is a growing concern. We've seen a number of violent acts in the city of Surrey recently, including several shootings and knife attacks, different levels of violence that are not necessarily linked to the cartel members, but very possibly could be. There's no definitive link or response from the RCMP or the Surrey Police Service to give us the confirmation one way or the other. Now, most recently, during or just prior to the show starting the other night, there was probably about 10 minutes from our studios here, there was another shooting where some of the neighbors reported hearing as many as 24, 25 different shots, rapid succession, so we're thinking automatic weapons being used. There was someone that was taken to hospital, but there were no fatalities at this time to report on that. Unlike earlier in the week or prior to that, in Surrey, again down towards Scott Road or 120th, there was a fatality that again was a shooting incident. On the same day as this most recent shooting that we were just talking about in South Surrey, the same day there was a violent attack in Surrey. The police had responded to an incident, and then unrelated to that particular incident was a gentleman that tried to steal from the police. I don't know if it was their firearms or what it was, but it was serious enough that the RCMP did fire a shot. That is under investigation. The shot fortunately did not strike anyone, and this was the result of this third party who was not involved in the original call. So they did take him into custody. He appeared in court and was held over without bail. So again, it's about the courts also cracking down on these violent individuals and holding them in custody so they're not free to wander the streets and commit other acts of violence. Random acts of violence are nothing new in the city of Surrey or in lower mainland British Columbia, or even across Canada. It's one of the problems that you have with gang activity. And although we know that there are links directly to the Sinaloa Cartel, there are many other gangs and international crime organizations that operate within our borders here in Canada as well. Now, when you take a look at the incidents of violence that are happening in relation to Donald Trump's orders to close the borders and his pressure with tariffs and everything else, that we know is misleading. The truth being is that there is very few or very little fentanyl being sent across the border between Canada and the United States going southbound from Canada. And that is a very small, very, very, very small amount in comparison to what is being transported across the southern borders, or that's actually being made up in labs within the U.S. from precursors being shipped in from places such as China, India, and elsewhere. So again, it is just another one of those facts of life, that we've got to deal with when it comes to misinformation coming out of the White House and out of that whole crew there that's, and I hate to call them an administration right now in the U.S. because it's more like a dictatorship and a criminal gang organization that's running the United States. It is just an ugly sight. Now, on that point, of course, Donald Trump is stating that he is going to dispose of and waive the presidential immunity that was given by President Joe Biden. He claims that because they may have been signed by AutoPen, that they are not in effect, which is just ludicrous. It doesn't matter how the signature was placed on those. The fact is that it had an official signature. They were recognized and issued in good faith. Therefore, President Trump has no authority, or shouldn't at least, to strip those individuals of that immunity that was issued to them by President Biden. And when he responded to that on his Truth Social site, he also claims that Joe Biden didn't know what the incidences were, what the crimes were, what the details were of these individuals. And I think that instead, when you look at all of the pardons that Donald Trump has issued since he's retaken office, it's very clear and simple to say that he doesn't know what he's signing half the time himself. He has issued pardons for individuals that were involved in the January 6th resurrection, but also to that, he has issued those pardons to people who have a history of sex assaults, of very violent crimes, and so much more. And some of them have been rearrested since they've received the pardon and charged with new offenses. You also take a look at the U.S. government interference in bringing back, the crypto bros and others from foreign countries who are, in effect, facing very serious allegations and charges overseas. And he has repatriated them to the United States, putting pressure on the foreign governments to reinstate their passports so they could do so. And that's just ridiculous. January 6th resurrection. Yeah, you know what I meant there. I apologize. Insurrection, not resurrection. My apologies. You're absolutely right, though. It is almost 1 o'clock in the morning here in Vancouver, so I apologize. Yeah, I just finished doing a different show. Of course, my nightly show for Savage TV. So my apologies. I misspoke, and thank you, Lafro, for correcting me on that. Yes, and I love all the emojis. That's awesome. Yeah, we are live. So yes, on occasion I will misspeak. I will make mistakes. So by all means, correct me. That's part of the fun of being live here with you. And again, if you have topics that you would like to talk about, throw it up in the comment section, or just throw up your corrections for me. So again, thank you, Lafro, for correcting me on that. Fred, welcome to the show. Again, folks, let me know where you're signing in from. It's always great to see how far the show reaches, where you're logging in from, and if you have topics that you would like to discuss. So we've just been talking, for those joining us, we've been talking about the Sinaloa Cartel and their tentacles reaching up into Canada, and particularly in my community of Surrey, British Columbia. Now, the other issue that's facing our community here in Surrey is that we're transitioning. For decades, we have had policing services for the city provided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And the city paid the contract with the federal service to provide the law enforcement for our local region. So the city's been paying for that for decades, but now they've decided to move. For you not in Surrey that don't know, they've decided to move to a municipal police force called the Surrey Police Service. And right now they are in that transition phase where the Surrey Police Service is now taking charge. They are still in the process of hiring more officers, of working out all the bugs. So they are augmented and complemented by police from the RCMP, still working in support of nature and under direction of the Surrey Police Service. So that can cause some issues when it comes to the policing, the overlap in the transition period. But in the big picture, it doesn't impact current legal cases, investigations, and all of that. It is a fairly seamless transition, but of course there's going to be some bugs. But again, there are some criminal organizations that see it as an opportunity to take it upon themselves to test the new police service, so to speak, and see what they can get away with. So again, it is a transition. But again, they are working impactfully for the community and breaking up these large drug rings and these drug labs, the distribution facilities. And at this time, the arrests that were made within the Sinaloa Cartel, or with those linked to the Sinaloa Cartel, the police are not only in terms of the criminal activity, but they're also going after the proceeds of crime in terms of trying to confiscate the home, the cash and everything else that was associated with that. There's some high-end vehicles and so forth, and they are going through the Forfeiture Act to try to get those all forfeited to the province. Now, one of the other issues that I do have as a concern is that one of the individuals, or several possibly, are not being charged, and somebody within the government and law enforcement has claimed that they feel they may not be prosecuted because now we have what's called the Jordan Act. And essentially all crimes within Canada must be prosecuted within a timely manner. And there are guidelines set out by the Supreme Court of Canada that dictate that timeline. Now, unfortunately, within the timeline, they say that with the amount of evidence that has been gathered on this case, that they may not have enough time to prosecute given the volume of evidence. Now, to me, that is just ridiculous that, you claim that you cannot prosecute criminals because you have too much evidence and it'll take too long to take them through trial. That would breach the timeline set out by the Supreme Court for a speedy or fair due process of law. And to me, that's ridiculous. Here, criminals have been trying to hide evidence for years and decades and forever. And as it turns out, they actually were doing quite the opposite. They just need to create so much evidence that they wouldn't be able to try them and show all the evidence within the time allotted by the Supreme Court. So again, that's just ridiculous. I don't know that is going to carry weight with the Canadian public, because when you say that you have so much evidence you can't have a timely trial, that is not going to fly, and either they make exceptions and rules that allow for such, or I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of politicians who are going to be losing their jobs when it comes time to voice opinions at the polls, because Canadians are fed up with the crime. They are fed up with violence. They are fed up with all of the criminal activity that's happening in our streets, and we want real solutions, and we want people prosecuted for these crimes. And to say once again that there's too much evidence, that you can't present a case to a judge or to a jury within the timeline allowed by the courts is just insane. And yeah, I just don't know how that even flies, or how anybody could say that. Even if it's true, I wouldn't want to be the person saying that publicly and facing the backlash. And as a result, I'm not naming the source who gave that information, but again, it is concerning. When you look at the law enforcement, whether it is in British Columbia, whether it's in Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, Nova Scotia, doesn't matter where you are in Canada, Canadians are concerned about crime. They want tougher programs when it comes to not only the prosecution, but also the incarceration. And I think that a big part of that, if you're going to go the tough on crime route, you also have to bring in some type of programming increase for youth and for first-time or second-time offenders, to try to get them while they're in their infancy of their criminality or their criminal career, and try to give them opportunities to correct themselves, to be better, and to give them a future and an outlook or goals for the future with with those being achievable. And when I say that, I also am I'm a strong believer in the fact that if someone goes to jail or to federal prisons, they should be forced to educate themselves or to participate in educational programming. I think that it is ridiculous that we send them in to basically warehouse them and expect behavior and attitudes to change when they come out. When they are sitting in a cell for most of the day, when they are interacting with other criminals, they don't always understand that learning from these other individuals locked up is not the best policy, considering where you're meeting them. But again, I think that a lot could be said for mandatory education programs in prisons to try to give people a bit of direction and to give them better life skills and tools to be really, a big part of society when they return, to be giving back to society, to be having a future, and, to make their lives better. I think, again, we're missing an opportunity to stop or at least reduce recidivism rates by forced education. I think that should be a no-brainer when it comes to people incarcerated. Give them the tools to succeed upon release. Don't just throw them in with other criminals for a set period of time, release them and expect them to behave differently, because there's no incentive and you've not given them the tools. There are some programs, of course, in different prison systems or jail systems to help to give those life skills or to give education opportunities and that, but I feel that there are not enough people taking liberties or taking them for granted to use them, to grow themselves, to learn. And yeah, as I said, I think that it should be mandatory. If people have learning disabilities or mental health issues, I think that there's a lot to be said that you could use the opportunity of having them locked up and incarcerated for crime to force them to be better, to force them to learn, and of course to offer them the services and the ability to learn. So maybe the school system failed them, and they, for whatever reasons or external factors, prevented them from finishing school. But here you have a captive audience that I think that you could make better by forcing that education. Just my thoughts. I'd love to know what your thoughts are out there in terms of the viewers. Merbro, Lee, whatever. Whole bunch of different scattered letters. Singil, welcome. Pamela, Roland, Marcus, no girlfriend. Sorry to hear that. Kenza, Zuki King, Joe, welcome everybody to the program. Again, if you have topic ideas, throw them up on the screen if there's something you want to discuss. Or you can just let me know where you're watching from. It is always cool to know where people are logging in from. So again, where are you? Where are you in terms of country? Are you in Canada, the U.S., India, Bangalore? Wherever you're logging in, it's always cool to know. It's me. I am her. Welcome to the program. Again, let me know where you're logging in from. It's always cool to know. So again, back to the previous conversation though. So again, for the Canadian criminal justice system to claim that they don't have the time available under the guidelines to prosecute someone because there's so much evidence, again, I just think is a ridiculous cop-out and not acceptable, especially when you're dealing with drug dealers and violent offenders and people with links to the Sinaloa cartel. It's just beyond me that they would even consider such an argument. That would be like basically, let's take a look back to 1984, 1985, and the unease and the disputes that were between the Sikhs and the Indian government, and the flight, Air India flight. Now, are you telling me that if that happened today, because of the mass volume of evidence, that you wouldn't be able to try terrorists for such activities? Again, it just does not make sense to me that they are concerned about trials taking too long now outside of the limits that have been set by the courts. It just is beyond me that they would say they have too much evidence to present within the timelines allowed. That should be just gone. That shouldn't even be a thought. When it comes to other issues in the news, well, of course, we have a new Prime Minister in Canada. It's Mark Carney. For those of you who don't know Mark Carney, he is a local Canadian from the prairies. He grew up playing hockey. He still has a passion for hockey. And, of course, being Canadian, that's not surprising. He got a scholarship that took him to the U.S. for some Ivy League education. He is very well educated in economics, and he so much so that he had worked at top stock brokerages and such in the U.S. in New York. And then he finally became the governor of the Bank of Canada. And then after that stint, he went over to the UK, where he was the head of the Bank of England. Following that, he was a liaison or a representative to the United Nations when it came to climate and economy. So he is very well versed in economic situations. He has, in his past, helped Canada fare through some big challenges. And he also helped to prevent the big crash in Canada that we saw in the U.S. many years ago when it came to the housing bubble bursting and all of that, and banks being needed to be bailed out. Canada has stricter regulations when it comes to banking in Canada. That is why there are a lot of U.S. banks that operate here that are in commercial finance and such. They are not so much the retail banks because of the regulations and restrictions that are in place to protect the consumers. And that is why you don't see a lot of international banks operating retail branches here. And that has to do with the amount that they have to keep in reserves, different regulations they got to report and reporting, as well as regulatory restrictions. So again, that's a big deal as to why you don't see the retail branches of, say, Bank of America or Wells Fargo, but you do see them operating in Canada in commercial banking. So that's the difference. Unfortunately, we've seen in the media where there have been accusations that Canada doesn't allow the U.S. banks into Canada, and that's not the fact. There are a lot of U.S. banks operating here. They just choose not to be involved in retail banking because of the regulations and reporting requirements that we have here. Once again, it has helped us to protect people from losing their homes, from losing their what we call their retirement savings. Here in the U.S., they refer to 401ks. So again, there's a lot more protection for the consumers here in Canada than there were in other territories or regions, including the U.S. So again, that is a bit of clarification as to why you don't see just public branches of those U.S. banks. Yes, there are Canadian banks operating in the United States, and they do offer retail and commercial services. And that, again, has to do with the reduced regulations in the U.S. not being in line with Canada. They are able to work within the infrastructure there and the setup that the U.S. has set forward under their Banking Practices Act and their different laws. So, with that said, of course, you have international banks and that as well, with offices here. There's the Bank of India, has commercial offices here, and so forth. So it's not just the U.S., it's international. Banks from around the world are here, but again, in the commercial end, not in the retail banking end. Other than that, folks, I thank you for watching another live chat with James. I hope you enjoyed the sessions. Again, I will be back tomorrow night about the same time. We'll do another live episode. If you have subject ideas or story ideas that you would like me to bring on to the show, let me know. As you can see behind me, there is a new backdrop, a new background. It's a live one, and we'll have different things going up there. We're just trying to play with the studio setup and make some improvements for these live shows. So again, let us know what you think and give us your feedback. But again, let us know where you're tuning in from or where you're logging in from, because as we go forward, we're looking at changing our time frame for the live shows, and we would like to know what is beneficial for our viewers. And, we want you to be a part of the show. So again, make sure that you interact through the comment section. Once again, this is James Kuzno for Live Chat with James, coming to you from the ProPic Studios here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. We'll see you tomorrow night. Stay safe. Take care, everyone.